Hi guys, the night is already deep when we begin. Somewhere beyond the dark fields, a small river moves slowly through the land. Its surface catches almost no light. The moon is hidden behind a thin layer of cloud, and the old trees beside the water stand almost still. A narrow road passes between low fields, disappearing into the darkness before reaching a village made of timber, earth, and stone. There is no great sound here. Only the soft movement of leaves. A little water. The distant cry of a night bird. And now and then, the quiet shift of someone sleeping inside a small house. It is difficult to imagine how much life once gathered around places like this. The village may seem empty from a distance. A few dark roofs. A church tower rising above them. A fence around a garden. A line of trees. Perhaps a wooden bridge crossing the stream. But behind those walls, people are resting. Farmers. Mothers. Children. Old men and women. Craft workers. Servants. Travelers who have arrived late and found a place near the fire. Their day has been long. And tomorrow will begin early. So for a little while, there is nothing to do. The fields can wait. The animals are quiet. The tools are leaning against walls. The ovens have cooled. The last candle is burning low. And in this gentle darkness, we can slowly move backward through the centuries, toward the ordinary life of a medieval village. Not the life of kings. Not the life of castles. Not the life remembered in grand stories. But the smaller life. The daily life. The life of people whose names were often never written down. People who woke before sunrise and worked until evening. People who knew the feel of wet soil beneath their feet. People who carried water from a well. People who swept the floor with a simple bundle of twigs. People who baked bread, repaired fences, mended clothing, fed chickens, milked cows, gathered firewood, carried baskets, sharpened tools, and watched the seasons change. Their lives were built from small things. A loaf of bread. A wooden spoon. A clay bowl. A wool blanket. A handful of grain. A warm fire. A pair of worn shoes. A quiet place beside the wall where the sun reached in the afternoon. And because these small things were so important, nearly every part of the day had a familiar rhythm. The village did not need a clock to know when morning had arrived. The darkness itself slowly changed. The black sky became gray. The gray became pale. And somewhere inside a low house, a person opened tired eyes. For a moment, they remained still. The room was cold. The fire from the previous evening had become a bed of ash, with perhaps one small red glow hidden underneath. The roof above was dark. The air smelled faintly of smoke. There might be straw beneath the sleeping body, covered with a rough cloth or a simple blanket. There might be another person sleeping nearby. Children might be gathered together for warmth. A dog could be curled near the doorway. Nobody wanted to leave the warmth immediately. Morning had its own weight. Especially in winter. Outside, frost covered the grass. The road was hard and pale. The wooden fence was cold beneath the hand. But inside the house, someone had to rise. The day was waiting. A little kindling was placed onto the old ashes. A breath of air was given to the embers. Then, slowly, the fire returned. At first it was only a tiny glow. Then a small flame. Then another. Soon the room began to change. The darkness around the walls softened. The clay pots became visible. The wooden beams appeared above. A bundle of tools could be seen in one corner. A basket sat beside the wall. There was no sudden beginning. The medieval morning came gradually. And perhaps that is one of the quietest things to imagine. The village waking not all at once, but house by house. One fire beginning. Then another. A door opening. A goat making a small sound. A rooster calling somewhere behind a fence. Footsteps moving across packed earth. A woman preparing a simple breakfast. A farmer checking the weather through the doorway. A child still asleep beneath a blanket. The village slowly returning to itself. For most people, there was no need to wonder what they would do that day. The season already knew. The soil already knew. The animals already knew. If it was planting time, there was planting. If it was harvest time, there was harvesting. If rain had softened the fields, there would be work with the soil. If winter had closed over the land, there would be repairs, chopping, carrying, spinning, weaving, and careful use of whatever food had been stored. The year itself was a kind of calendar. And the village lived inside it. In spring, the ground began to soften. The fields became dark and wet. People carried seed. The wooden plow moved through the soil. The animals pulled. The farmer walked behind. Step after step. The same motion repeated across the field. The furrows appeared in long lines. The earth turned. The morning passed. The sun rose higher. There was no need to hurry in the way we might imagine. There was plenty of work, but the work had its own pace. A person could only walk so quickly behind an ox. A person could only dig so many rows before stopping. A person could only carry so much. Much of medieval village life was shaped by the simple limits of the human body. Hands became tired. Shoulders became sore. Feet became dusty. Clothing became damp with sweat. At the end of a long day, the body remembered every movement. And yet, the next morning, the work began again. There is something strangely peaceful about imagining that repetition. The same path through the village. The same wooden gate. The same field. The same tools. The same animals. The same river. The same small house. The same bread. The same familiar faces. A person's world could be very small. And within that small world, there could be thousands of details. A particular tree near the well. A certain stone that always became warm in the afternoon. The place where rainwater gathered beside the road. The sound of a particular cartwheel. The smell of bread from a particular house. The creak of a wooden door. The sound of someone sharpening a knife. These things were ordinary. But ordinary things were the fabric of life. In a medieval village, home was rarely a large private space. For many families, the house was small and crowded. The walls could be made from timber filled with woven branches and clay, or from stone, earth, or other local materials. The roof might be thatched. The floor could be packed earth. The room was not filled with furniture. There was little reason for unnecessary furniture. A chest might hold clothing. A bench could be used for sitting and working. A table might be little more than a rough wooden surface. There could be stools, baskets, clay pots, wooden bowls, tools, bundles of cloth, a spinning spindle, perhaps a few personal objects. The fire was often at the center of everything. It gave warmth. It gave light. It cooked food. It dried damp clothing. It made the room feel alive during the cold months. Smoke could fill the space, especially when ventilation was poor. It settled into the roof. It clung to clothing. It became part of the smell of the house. And after many years, everything in the room might seem to carry the memory of smoke. The walls, the beams, the blankets, the wooden bowls, even the hair and clothing of the people who lived there. At night, the fire became especially important. Without electric light, darkness was not something easily pushed away. The world outside simply became dark. A candle or rushlight could provide a small circle of light. But candles were valuable. Light itself required materials and labor. So evening work was often done close to the fire. Someone might repair a garment. Someone might prepare food for the next day. Someone might twist wool. A farmer might examine a worn tool. A child might sit quietly near an older family member. The light would flicker across the walls. The shadows would move. And outside, the village would gradually disappear. There was little reason to stay awake late unless there was work to do. Sleep came naturally after a day of physical labor. The bed was not always a bed in the familiar sense. It could be a wooden frame, a simple platform, a mattress filled with straw, a pile of woven material, a blanket, a rough sheet. For some, sleeping arrangements were shared. Privacy was limited. The entire household occupied the same general space. Children slept near parents or siblings. Animals could be nearby, depending on the house and local customs. In winter, closeness meant warmth. And warmth mattered. Cold could enter through cracks in walls and roofs. Wind could move through a doorway. Moisture could settle into clothing. A fire could shrink during the night. So people slept beneath layers of cloth and straw, listening to the wind outside. Sometimes the rain came. It struck the roof again and again. A soft, steady sound. Inside, someone turned beneath the blanket. The fire gave a small crack. The house remained dark. And the rain continued. Morning would come when it came. The village did not need to know the exact hour. The sky would tell them. The animals would tell them. The church bell, where there was a church, might also divide the day. The sound could travel over fields and roofs. A single bell note moving through the cool air. Then silence again. The medieval village was a place of work, but it was also a place of waiting. Waiting for rain. Waiting for spring. Waiting for a child to be born. Waiting for bread to rise. Waiting for a field to dry. Waiting for harvest. Waiting for a traveler. Waiting for winter to end. People lived closely with things they could not control. Weather could decide whether the work went well. Rain could be welcome one week and troublesome the next. Too little water could damage crops. Too much could make roads difficult and fields heavy. A cold spring could delay growth. An early frost could damage plants. And because so much of life depended on the land, people paid attention. They watched clouds. They felt the wind. They noticed birds. They knew the soil. They learned the small signs of changing weather. A farmer did not need a written forecast to understand that the air had changed. The morning itself gave clues. The smell of wet earth. The direction of the wind. The shape of clouds above the fields. The coldness of the grass. The behavior of animals. The village was surrounded by information, if only one knew how to read it. And then there was food. Food was never simply something placed on a plate. It began much earlier. It began in the field. In the garden. At the mill. in the hands of someone carrying a basket. Bread was especially important. Grain had to be grown, harvested, stored, ground, mixed with water, worked into dough, then baked. Each loaf represented many hours of work. In the village, the smell of bread could be one of the most comforting smells in the world. A warm loaf emerging from an oven, steam escaping from its surface, the crust darkening, the inside soft and dense. Perhaps there was no great feast. Perhaps the meal was simple. Bread, porridge, beans, peas, vegetables, cheese, eggs, a little meat when available, fish in places near rivers or coasts, herbs, onions, whatever could be grown, gathered, traded, or stored. Meals followed the seasons. Fresh foods appeared when they could. Stored foods became important when the fields were quiet. People preserved what they could. They dried things, salted them, stored grain, kept roots in cool places, made use of every part of what was available. Nothing was casually wasted. Food had passed through too many hands. The farmer, the miller, the baker, the cook, the person who carried water, the person who gathered wood, the person who tended the animals. Every meal rested upon work. And so eating could be quiet. A family sitting near the fire. Wooden bowls placed on the table. A spoon passed from hand to hand. Bread broken into pieces. Steam rising from a pot. A child reaching toward the warm food. Someone reminding the child to wait. The fire moving gently. The house smelling of grain, smoke, and cooked vegetables. Outside, the cold evening settling over the fields. This was not a grand banquet, but it was enough to make the room feel warm. And for many people, enough was the central idea. Enough food for today. Enough wood for tonight. Enough seed for spring. Enough grain to last through winter. Enough cloth to repair the old clothing. Enough strength to finish the work. The village existed within these small calculations. Every household knew its stores. Every household knew what was running low. A sack of grain was not merely a sack. It was future bread. It was survival through another week. Perhaps another month. Perhaps part of a winter. The storage room mattered. The granary mattered. The cellar mattered. The barn mattered. The careful person who checked the stores mattered. And so did the animals. Cows. Sheep. Goats. Pigs. Chickens. Horses. Oxen. They were part of the rhythm of the village. Morning began with feeding. Water had to be carried. Milking had to be done. Stalls had to be cleaned. Animals had to be moved. Fences had to be checked. In some places, animals were taken out toward common grazing lands. The village would spread outward into fields and meadows. A shepherd could spend hours beneath an open sky. There might be little sound except bells around the necks of animals. A flock moving slowly through grass. A dog resting nearby. The shepherd watching. The hours passing. The sun crossing the sky. From far away, the village might look almost motionless. But it was never completely still. Smoke rose from chimneys. People walked along paths. Carts moved slowly. Animals crossed roads. Someone carried a bundle of sticks. Someone brought water from the well. Someone returned from the fields. Someone sat outside a doorway repairing a tool. Someone washed clothing. Someone called to a child. The village was made of movement. Small movement. Repeated movement. Familiar movement. And the roads were often little more than dirt tracks. After rain, they became mud. Wheels sank. Shoes became heavy. Carts moved slowly. A person could feel the mud pulling at their feet. During dry weather, dust rose from the road. It settled on shoes and hems. It entered houses. It covered the lower parts of walls. Travel was not always easy. A village that seems close on a map could require hours of walking. A neighboring settlement might be reached by a narrow path through woods. A market town could lie beyond fields and hills. People carried what they could. Baskets. Bundles. Sacks. Small packages wrapped in cloth. A merchant might travel with a cart. A farmer might walk beside an animal. A messenger might arrive tired and dusty. And every traveler brought something from elsewhere. News. Goods. Rumors. Stories. Different kinds of cloth. Salt. Tools. Pottery. Perhaps spices or other valuable items. The market was one of the places where the quiet village world opened slightly. But even the market was filled with ordinary things. People looking at grain. Someone weighing produce. A seller arranging vegetables. A craftsman showing a tool. A woman carrying a basket. A child holding tightly to a parent's hand. The sounds could be many, but none needed to be imagined as dramatic. Voices mixing. Animals shifting. Wooden wheels creaking. Footsteps pressing into dirt. The smell of bread. Smoke. Leather. Hay. Rain. Earth. And beneath it all, the ordinary human sound of people doing business. A purchase might be small. A little salt. A piece of cloth. A tool that could not be made at home. A pot. A pair of shoes. A handful of something needed for the coming week. Money existed, but everyday exchange could also involve goods, labor, obligations, and local arrangements. The village economy was close to the body. You knew the person who made the shoes. You knew who kept the animals. You knew who had a good oven. You knew who could repair a wooden cart. You knew who could spin wool. You knew who had a field beside the stream. Work was personal because almost everything had a face behind it. A craft worker sat with their hands. A farmer walked behind an animal. A baker stood beside a hot oven. A blacksmith worked near fire. A miller listened to the turning machinery. A fisherman watched the water. A carpenter measured wood. A spinner moved fiber through their fingers. These occupations were different, but they shared something. Repetition. The hand learned. The body remembered. The work became familiar. A blacksmith did not need to think about every movement. The hammer rose. It fell. Metal changed. The hammer rose again. The sound carried across the village. A steady ringing from the workshop. Then quiet. Then another strike. The forge glowed. The worker's face became warm from the fire. Sweat appeared. Smoke moved upward. Tools rested nearby. The work continued. Elsewhere, a carpenter worked with wood. Shavings gathered around his feet. The smell of fresh timber filled the room. A plane moved along the surface. Slowly. Again and again. The rough wood became smoother. Outside the workshop, people passed. The carpenter continued. Nearby, someone might be spinning. The spindle dropped, turned, rose. The thread became longer. A simple movement repeated many times. There was no need for spectacle. The rhythm itself was enough. This was how a village was built. Not only with buildings, but with thousands of repeated motions. The turning of a spindle, the lifting of a bucket, the swinging of a sickle, the kneading of dough, the brushing of an animal, the chopping of wood, the carrying of water, the mending of cloth, the sweeping of floors, the turning of soil, the grinding of grain, the washing of bowls, the lighting of fires, the closing of doors. And as evening arrived, those motions slowly became fewer. The fields emptied. The animals were brought in. The tools were placed away. The last baskets came through the doorway. The road became quiet. Smoke rose more clearly against the darkening sky. Inside each house, evening began. The fire was fed. Food was prepared. Wet clothing was hung. Children became quieter. Older people settled into their places. Someone might tell a story. Someone might say a prayer. Someone might simply sit and listen. There was no need to fill every silence. Silence was part of life. After the day's labor, the body could become very heavy. Hands rested. Feet stretched near the fire. A tired back leaned against a wall. Someone rubbed their fingers. Someone closed their eyes. The warmth moved slowly through the room. And beyond the walls, night covered the fields. The road became a dark ribbon. The trees became shadows. The church tower disappeared into the sky. The river continued moving. The animals settled. The wind passed over the roofs. Inside the small houses, one by one, the lights became dim. A candle shortened. A fire lowered. A door was closed. A blanket was pulled higher. And for a few hours, the village became almost completely still. But not entirely. There was always some small sound. A horse moving in the stable. A baby waking. A dog shifting on the floor. A log breaking in the fire. Rain against the roof. Wind through a gap in the wall. Someone coughing in the darkness. Then quiet again. The people sleeping there did not know what future historians would say about their century. They did not know which kings would later be remembered. They did not know which castles would become ruins. They did not know which roads would disappear. They did not know which names would survive. They simply slept. And perhaps this is where the forgotten daily life of the medieval village becomes easiest to feel. Not in the grand events, but in the moment when a tired farmer finally lies down. The hands that work the soil are still. The feet that walk the fields are covered. The room is dark. The fire is almost gone. Outside, the night air rests over the village. Tomorrow there will be more work. But tomorrow has not arrived yet. For now, there is only darkness. Only warmth. Only the quiet breathing of people sleeping close together. And beyond the little house, the fields stretch away beneath the night sky. The crops are still. The trees are still. The path is empty. The river moves without hurry. Somewhere in the distance, an animal makes one soft sound, and then stops. The village settles deeper into sleep. And slowly, the night passes over it. Hours move without anyone counting them. The stars travel above the roof. The fire becomes ash. The cold air touches the walls. And eventually, far away on the edge of the fields, the darkness begins to change again. Not yet morning. Just the faintest suggestion of it. A softer sky. A little less black beyond the doorway. Another day waiting quietly. And inside the houses, people remain asleep for a little longer, wrapped in rough blankets and surrounded by the familiar smells of wood smoke, earth, wool, and yesterday's bread. The village has rested. For a short while, nothing has been required of it. The fields have remained untouched. The tools have remained still. The road has remained empty. And the old houses have held their sleeping families close. Soon, someone will wake. A hand will reach toward the ashes. A small flame will return. A door will open. Cold morning air will enter. And the first footsteps of another ordinary day will begin again. But for this quiet moment, before the first person rises, the village belongs entirely to the night. The river continues its slow journey. The grass holds the cold. The roofs remain dark. And beneath them, the people of the medieval village sleep. Their lives are simple in some ways and difficult in others, but for now none of that needs to be explained. There is only rest. A deep, quiet rest beneath the old roof. The kind that comes after a long day of carrying, lifting, walking, digging, cooking, mending, feeding, cleaning, and working. The kind of sleep that asks nothing. The kind of darkness that does not need to be filled. And as the night slowly moves toward morning, we can remain here a little longer, beside these quiet houses, listening to the faint wind moving across the fields, while the sleeping village waits peacefully for another day to begin. The first light does not arrive suddenly. It gathers slowly beyond the roofs, turning the eastern sky from black to a pale, quiet gray. The fields are still covered with the last coolness of night. Dew rests on the grass. The narrow paths between the houses are empty, and the wooden doors remain shut. For a little while, the village seems suspended between 2 days. Yesterday has ended. Today has not quite begun. Then, somewhere inside one of the houses, a person stirs. There is the soft sound of cloth moving against straw. Someone breathes deeply and turns. A child remains asleep. Another person opens their eyes. The room is cold. The fire has nearly disappeared. The first task is not complicated. The fire must be brought back. A hand reaches into the ashes. A small piece of charcoal is uncovered. Dry material is placed around it. A breath of air. Then another. The ember glows. A tiny flame appears. And once again, the room begins to have a center. The fire is small at first. It flickers beneath the darkness. Then it grows enough to show the nearest objects. A wooden bowl. A pot. A stool. A bundle of cloth. The edge of a chest. The sleeping faces of family members. Nothing has changed during the night. The same walls are there. The same roof. The same tools. The same work waiting outside. The person tending the fire may pause for a moment, simply feeling the warmth return. This is how many mornings begin. Not with a grand announcement. Not with a sudden rush. Just a small flame being kept alive. And then another household wakes. Then another. The village begins to breathe. A door opens. Someone steps outside. The air is sharp against the face. The ground is damp. A person carries a wooden bucket toward the well. The bucket swings gently from the hand. Footsteps press into the soft earth. The sound is quiet. Step. 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 At the well, the person lowers the rope. There is a scrape of wood. The rope moves through the hands. The bucket descends into darkness. For a moment, nothing can be heard except the faint movement of water below. Then the rope becomes heavy. It is pulled upward. Slowly. The bucket reaches the top. Water moves inside it. The person lifts it carefully. A little spills over the side. The ground darkens beneath their feet. Then they walk home. This small task may be repeated many times during the day. Water is needed for everything. Drinking, cooking, washing, animals, cleaning, the garden. The well is therefore not simply a place to collect water. It is one of the quiet centers of village life. People meet there. They may speak briefly. They may exchange news. They may notice who is ill, who has returned, who needs help, who has a new child, who has lost an animal, who is preparing for market. But often there is no need for much conversation. The bucket is lowered. The rope rises. Water is carried away. The same movements happen again and again. The village morning grows brighter. Roosters call. A dog walks through the yard. Sheep begin to move. Cattle shift in their stalls. A horse knocks one hoof against wood. The smell of smoke becomes stronger. Someone begins grinding grain. The sound is slow and steady. A stone moves against stone. Grain becomes flour. The work requires patience. There are no shortcuts. The hands continue. The shoulders move. The grinding goes on. A little flour gathers. Then more. Soon it will become dough. Soon after that, bread. But bread still lies somewhere in the future of the morning. First there are many smaller things. A child must be dressed. An animal must be fed. A floor must be swept. A pot must be filled. A fire must be adjusted. A door must be opened. A tool must be found. A piece of clothing must be pulled over tired shoulders. The village does not wake to one single task. It wakes to hundreds of small obligations. And most of them are familiar. A person may have performed the same task for years. They know where the bucket is. They know where the wood is stacked. They know which animal is restless. They know which part of the roof leaks when rain comes from a certain direction. They know where the floor is uneven. They know which child wakes easily. They know which loaf needs more time. They know how much grain remains. They know how much work the field needs. This knowledge is not written down. It lives in the hands. It lives in memory. It passes from one generation to another. A child watches an adult prepare bread. A young person watches someone repair a fence. A boy learns how to guide an animal. A girl learns how thread is spun. Older people teach without making a lesson of it. They simply do the work. The younger person watches. Then tries. The hands make mistakes. The work is corrected. And slowly, another skill becomes part of daily life. There is something gentle about this kind of learning. The village is a place where knowledge is often close to the body. How much water should be carried? How much grain should be ground? How deeply should a seed be planted? How long should bread remain near the fire? How much wood should be kept for the night? How to recognize a healthy animal? How to mend a torn sleeve? How to make a roof hold against rain? How to tell when the ground is ready? The seasons teach as well. Winter teaches patience. Spring teaches preparation. Summer teaches endurance. Autumn teaches gathering and storage. The same year returns again and again. And people build their lives around its return. In the fields, morning work begins. A farmer walks toward the edge of the village. The path passes between houses. He carries a tool over one shoulder. Perhaps a wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. His shoes are damp. The air is cool. The field lies ahead. It is not beautiful in the way a garden might be beautiful. It is useful. It is necessary. Rows of earth. Small plants. Stones. Mud. Grass along the edges. A fence. Perhaps a scarecrow or simple marker. Beyond it, another field. And beyond that, trees. The farmer begins. There is no need to hurry. The work is repetitive. The body knows what to do. A tool enters the soil. It lifts. It moves. The farmer steps forward. Again. 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 The sound of earth breaking is soft. Sometimes a bird lands nearby. Sometimes the wind moves through the crop. Sometimes the farmer stops to straighten their back. A hand rests on the tool. The eyes look across the field. Then the work resumes. Hours pass this way. The sun climbs. The coolness disappears. The morning becomes warmer. In summer, the heat can become heavy. The field gives little shade. The worker's clothing absorbs sweat. Dust sticks to the skin. The hands become dry. The mouth becomes thirsty. Water becomes precious. A small container might be carried from the village. Perhaps there is a shaded place beneath a tree where a worker can sit for a few minutes. The pause is short. There is still work waiting. But the pause matters. The body needs it. People knew their own limits because they had to. They knew when the shoulders needed rest. They knew when the sun had become too strong. They knew when an animal needed water. They knew when a tool needed sharpening. They knew when a day's work had reached its natural end. The medieval village was not a world without exhaustion. Far from it. The body carried much of the burden. Walking. Lifting. Carrying. Digging. Cutting. Grinding. Pushing. Pulling. Kneeling. Bending. Standing. The hands and feet were constantly involved. A person could become tired before noon. And there were days when tiredness stayed until night. Still, work continued because life depended on it. In the village, labor was not always separated from home life. The same person who worked in a field might return home and repair a wall. The person who cooked might also care for animals. The person who spun wool might also help in the garden. The person who cared for children might also prepare food, collect fuel, clean the house, and preserve supplies. There were many roles, but they often overlapped. A household was a small working world. Everyone contributed in some way. Even children could have responsibilities. A child might carry a small bucket, gather sticks, watch younger children, help with animals, collect eggs, carry messages, bring tools, pull weeds. The tasks were smaller, but they introduced the rhythm of work. Morning. Work. Food. Work again. Evening. Sleep. The pattern was familiar. And because everyone was close to the work, people understood the value of ordinary things. A clean piece of cloth. A dry pair of shoes. A full water bucket. A warm bowl of food. A repaired roof. A sharp knife. A healthy animal. A dry bundle of firewood. These were comforts. Not grand comforts, but real ones. The medieval village had few ways to escape the physical world. If the roof leaked, someone had to climb up and fix it. If the firewood was gone, someone had to gather more. If the clothes were torn, someone had to mend them. If the grain was not ground, someone had to grind it. If the road became muddy, people walked through the mud. If the field needed work, someone had to enter it. The material world was always close. And perhaps this made people attentive to small changes. The smell of rain. The feel of a warm wall. The sound of water. The softness of new wool. The weight of a basket. The heat from an oven. The coolness of a stone floor. The smell of freshly cut grass. These sensations were part of daily life. In one house, bread is beginning to bake. The dough has been shaped. The oven has already been heated. The fire has done its work. The embers are pushed aside. The bread is placed inside. The oven door is closed. Now there is waiting. A little smoke escapes. The smell slowly grows. It moves through the house. Then beyond the doorway. Perhaps a neighbor notices it. There is something comforting about the smell of bread in the morning. It means that someone has food. It means that grain has become something warm. It means there will be a meal. The bread may not be soft and delicate. It could be dark, dense, coarse, made from whatever grain was available. But when it is warm, even simple bread can feel important. A loaf is placed on the table. A knife cuts through the crust. The sound is dry and gentle. Pieces are distributed. Perhaps there is porridge as well. Maybe a little cheese. Maybe onions. Perhaps a few eggs. Food changes according to place and season. A village near a river has access to fish. A village near woodland has opportunities to gather nuts, berries, mushrooms, and other wild foods. A village surrounded by fields depends heavily on grain. Near the coast, fish and salt may become more important. There is no single medieval meal. There are thousands of local meals. But all of them depend on what the land can provide. And the land has its limits. People cannot simply ask the earth for more. They must wait. They must plant. They must protect. They must harvest. They must store. This makes harvest season especially important. By late summer and autumn, the village becomes busier. The fields that once seemed endless begin to change. Grain bends beneath its own weight. The color of the landscape shifts. People move through the fields with tools. The work is repetitive but urgent. The crop must be gathered. Bundles are tied. Grain is carried. Carts become loaded. The village paths become crowded. Animals move back and forth. People sweat. Dust rises. There is little time for long pauses. Everyone understands the importance of the work. But even here, the rhythm remains steady. Cut. Gather. Tie. Carry. Stack. Return. Again. Again. The same movements continue under the sun. By evening, the body feels heavy. Hands may ache. Backs may hurt. Feet may be sore. Clothing is covered with dust. But the gathered grain is inside. That matters. It means the work has become something that can be stored. The barn grows fuller. The household feels slightly safer. Not completely safe. The coming months are still unknown. But there is food in storage. That is something. Winter preparation begins long before the first snow. Wood must be gathered. Roofs must be repaired. Walls must be checked. Clothing must be mended. Animals must have shelter. Food must be stored carefully. Some vegetables can be kept in cool spaces. Grain must be protected from moisture. Meat may be preserved with salt or other methods. Everything has to be considered. A careless roof can ruin stored food. A damp room can spoil supplies. A broken fence can allow animals to escape. A shortage of wood can make winter nights much harder. So autumn has a quiet seriousness. The village becomes a place of preparation. The fields gradually empty. The trees lose their leaves. The days become shorter. The mornings begin colder. The sunlight feels lower. And people spend more time indoors. This changes the rhythm of the village. In summer, work begins early and can continue late. In winter, darkness arrives sooner. Indoor work becomes more important. Wool is spun. Clothing is repaired. Tools are maintained. Wood is shaped. Food is prepared. Stories are shared. The house becomes the center. The fire becomes more valuable. Smoke fills the room. The light is dim. A person may sit close to the warmth with their hands extended. The outside world can be cold and wet. Inside, the fire provides a small circle of comfort. There may be little space. People sit close together. Someone works with thread. Someone repairs a shoe. Someone prepares food. A child sleeps. An older person rests. The room is filled with quiet activity. No one needs to speak constantly. The work itself fills the silence. And when there is nothing left to repair or prepare, people simply sit. This is one of the parts of medieval village life that is easy to overlook. Rest was not necessarily a special event. It was woven into work. People rested while waiting for bread, while watching animals, while sitting beside a fire, while spinning, while talking, while walking. The body had to recover. Even the strongest worker needed sleep. And sleep could be deep. After a day of physical labor, there was little need to search for reasons to become tired. The body had already done the work. At night, the house became quiet. Someone might close the shutters. Someone might check the fire. The animals would settle. The last food would be put away. A cup or bowl might be washed. The door would be secured. Then the household would begin to disappear into darkness. The same room that had been busy during the day became a sleeping space. The table remained. The tools remained. The fire remained. But voices became softer. The flame became smaller. One by one, people lay down. And the village became quiet again. Yet daily life was not always peaceful inside the body. Illness was part of ordinary existence. A person might wake with fever. A cough might last for days. A wound could become painful. A tooth might ache. A child might become weak. An older person might lose strength. Without modern medicine, many common illnesses could be difficult to treat. But medieval people did not simply ignore illness. They had their own knowledge. Plants, herbs, food, rest, warmth, cold water, poultices, traditional remedies, the advice of experienced people. The care of family members. Much of healing happened inside the home. A sick person might lie near the fire. Someone would bring water. Someone would prepare a simple meal. Someone might sit nearby. The household became quiet around the sick person. Work still had to continue, but there was also care. A hand on the forehead. A bowl held close. A blanket pulled higher. A fire kept warm. These gestures are very old. They belong to no particular century. When someone is weak, another person stays close. And so even in a world of hard labor, there was tenderness. A mother washing a child's face. A husband helping an exhausted wife sit down. A daughter caring for an elderly parent. A neighbor bringing food. A friend helping with a task that could not be completed. Village life could be difficult, but people were rarely completely alone. The closeness of the community could bring its own burdens. Everyone knew everyone. Private matters were often not very private. People noticed changes. They noticed absences. They noticed who was working. Who was sick. Who was expecting a child. Who had lost a relative. Who had come from another place. But the same closeness could also provide support. If a roof needed repairing, neighbors might help. If a harvest was too large for one household, more hands could be gathered. If a family was struggling, food might be shared. If a person died, the village would know. The bell might sound. People would gather. The house would become a place of mourning. The work of daily life would pause for a little while. Then, slowly, it would continue. That was one of the strongest rhythms of village existence. Life changed. But the work remained. The fields still needed tending. Animals still needed feeding. Bread still needed baking. Water still needed carrying. Children still needed care. The seasons did not stop because someone was sad. And so grief and ordinary work existed beside one another. A person could mourn in the morning and carry a basket in the afternoon. Someone could sit beside a sick relative and later return to the garden. The medieval village did not separate life into neat categories. Everything touched everything else. The weather. The crops. The household. The body. The animals. The church. The market. The road. The seasons. The people. All of it was connected. Even the village church, where one stood nearby, was part of the daily landscape. Its bells could divide the day. Its doorway could become a meeting place. Its cemetery held the memory of people who had lived there before. The churchyard might be surrounded by grass and trees. People passed through it. Children might walk near old stones. Adults might pause. The dead were not far away. They were part of the same landscape. The village remembered through places rather than books. An old tree. A field. A house. A grave. A path. A well. A bridge. A wall. A person could know the history of the village simply by knowing where things stood. Perhaps an older woman remembered that a particular house had belonged to her parents. Perhaps a farmer knew that a field had been worked by his family for generations. Perhaps a path was known by a name that had existed longer than anyone could explain. The land held memory. And the people moved through that memory every day. They walked the same roads their parents had walked. They carried water from the same well. They crossed the same stream. They worked fields whose boundaries were familiar. They watched the same hills. They saw the same church tower. For many people, the village was the center of the known world. Beyond it were other places. Other villages. Towns. Forests. Markets. Rivers. Roads. But home was here. Home was the house where the fire was lit. The place where one sleeping space waited. The yard where animals were kept. The field where work was done. The well where water was drawn. The path where familiar footsteps passed. Home was not necessarily comfortable in the way we might imagine comfort. The walls could be cold. The floor could be hard. Smoke could sting the eyes. Rain could enter. Winter could be difficult. But familiarity has its own warmth. A person knew where everything belonged. They knew the sound of the door. They knew the smell of the fire. They knew the voices around them. They knew which corner was theirs. And after a long day outside, returning to that familiar space could bring relief. The road home in the evening was perhaps one of the quietest parts of the day. The sun had begun to lower. The fields were turning gold or gray. Birds moved through the trees. A worker walked slowly. The tool rested over one shoulder. The basket was lighter now. The day's work had been done. Ahead, the village roofs appeared. Smoke rose from chimneys. The first lights began to glow behind shutters. A dog recognized the approaching footsteps. A door opened. Someone called from inside. The worker entered. Cold air remained on the clothing. Warm air touched the face. The fire was burning. Food was waiting. Perhaps not much, but enough. A bowl. A piece of bread. Something warm. A place to sit. A place to rest. The hands could finally become still. The feet could finally stop. And for a while, nothing needed to be carried. Outside, another person was still returning from the fields. A cart moved slowly along the road. Wooden wheels creaked. An animal walked with lowered head. The driver sat quietly. The sky became darker. The village sounds softened. And once again, the ordinary day moved toward evening. The same village that had been waking only hours earlier was now becoming quiet. The paths emptied. The well stood alone. The fields darkened. The workshops closed. The animals settled. Inside the houses, food was eaten. Clothing was repaired. Children became sleepy. Older people rested. The fire became the brightest thing in the room. And slowly, the world beyond the doorway disappeared. There were no distant lights stretching across the horizon. No constant sound from beyond the village. Just darkness. The stars. The wind. The occasional bark of a dog. The rustle of straw. The quiet movement of people preparing for sleep. One house. Then another. Then another. The village became a collection of small warm rooms surrounded by the night. And perhaps, in one of those rooms, someone was still awake. They might be sitting beside the fire. Their hands resting in their lap. Their face illuminated by a low orange glow. The day's work had left a deep tiredness in the body. There was nothing more to do. The grain was stored. The animals were fed. The door was closed. The water was inside. The bread had been eaten. The tools were put away. Tomorrow would bring more work. But tonight could simply be allowed to pass. The person might listen to the fire. A small crack. A soft settling of wood. A faint movement of ash. Outside, wind moves through the thatched roof. The house creaks. The person looks toward the sleeping family. Everyone is quiet. And eventually, The last little task is finished. The fire is covered. The candle is lowered. The room becomes darker. The person lies down. Straw shifts beneath the body. The blanket is pulled close. The warmth of the room remains. The sounds become softer. The breathing of others fills the darkness. And again, the medieval village sleeps. Beyond the houses, the fields are waiting. The animals are resting. The roads are empty. The trees stand quietly. And somewhere beyond the fields, perhaps a river moves beneath the moon. The water does not know the names of the people sleeping nearby. It simply moves. Slowly. Quietly. Through the darkness. And while it moves, the village rests. Another day has passed through hundreds of small actions. Another day of water carried. Bread prepared. Soil turned. Animals fed. Clothing mended. Children cared for. Tools used. Food stored. Fires tended. And now the hands are still. The village has nothing more to ask of them tonight. The darkness grows deeper. The roof holds. The walls remain. The fire gives its last warmth. And beneath the old roofs, tired people sleep together in the quiet. Soon enough, the eastern sky will become pale again. The well will be visited. The animals will wake. The fire will return. The fields will call. But not yet. For now, the village can remain in the darkness. Quiet. Still. Resting beneath the wide night sky. And the slow river beyond the fields continues to move, carrying the night gently forward. The river keeps moving through the darkness. Its surface is almost impossible to see now, but its presence can be felt in the faint sound beyond the fields. Water passing over stones. Water touching the banks. Water continuing through the night while the village sleeps. The houses remain quiet. Behind their walls, people are still resting. A few embers glow beneath the ash. A dog is curled near a doorway. The cattle are warm inside their shelter. The roofs are dark. And the narrow paths between the houses are empty. For a little longer, there is nothing to hear except the night. Then, gradually, the darkness begins to thin. Morning is returning. The change is so slow that no one notices the exact moment when it begins. The stars become fewer. The eastern horizon grows pale. The outlines of trees become visible again. A bird calls once. Then another answers from somewhere farther away. Inside the houses, people begin to stir. Another day is waiting. And once again, the first work belongs to the fire. Someone moves carefully through the darkness. A piece of wood is added. The ashes are opened. A breath of air reaches the ember. The fire wakes. This small act is repeated throughout the village. One household. Then another. Then another. Soon thin smoke begins to rise from the roofs. The village becomes visible in the early light. The fields beyond it are still quiet. But the day has already begun. There is something almost circular about this life. The same actions return. Fire. Water. Food. Animals. Fields. Work. Rest. Darkness. Then fire again. A person could live many years inside this rhythm. They could know the village in every season. They could know how the road feels beneath the feet after rain. They could know where the morning sun first reaches the wall. They could know which tree becomes yellow before the others. They could know where snow gathers in winter. They could know where the stream becomes shallow enough to cross. They could know the smell of the earth before a storm. The landscape was not just scenery. It was familiar. It was useful. It was remembered. And the village itself had a shape that people understood without needing to think about it. The houses gathered close together. The church might stand near the center. The well could be somewhere nearby. There could be barns, sheds, ovens, workshops, gardens, animal pens, and small strips of cultivated land. Beyond the houses were the fields. Beyond the fields, meadows. Beyond those, woods. And beyond the woods, perhaps another village. The distance between one place and another was measured by the body. How long it took to walk. How long it took to carry a load. How long an animal could travel. How much food was needed for the journey. The world was known through footsteps. A road was not simply a line on a map. It was mud beneath the shoe. Stone beneath the heel. Grass brushing against the ankle. A hill that made breathing harder. A bridge that creaked under a cart. A stream that had to be crossed. A patch of woodland where the light became dim. Travel could make even familiar distances feel large. And most villagers did not spend their days traveling far. Their work was close. Their fields were close. Their animals were close. Their families were close. The village was the center of life. This closeness meant that daily sounds mattered. The blacksmith's hammer could be heard from a distance. The mill could make its own steady noise. A cartwheel might complain as it turned. A saw could move through timber. A bell could carry across fields. The sound of grain being ground could come from a nearby building. A person learned to recognize these sounds. They became part of the background of life. A quiet village was never completely silent. Even before sunrise, there might be animals calling. A rooster. A horse. A sheep. A dog. The sounds came and went. Then human voices joined them. A door opening. A bucket being placed on the ground. Someone calling to a child. Someone greeting a neighbor. Someone asking about the weather. The day gathered its sounds slowly. And with the sounds came smells. Smoke. Damp soil. Hay. Animal warmth. Fresh bread. Wood. Wet wool. Cooking food. In summer, the smell of grass could be strong. In autumn, there was the smell of leaves and grain. In winter, smoke seemed to remain everywhere. In spring, the ground itself smelled different after rain. People lived close enough to notice these changes. They did not need to be told that the season had turned. The village smelled different. The fields looked different. The air felt different. The work changed. And the food changed. This connection between food and season was especially strong. In spring, fresh greens might appear. In summer, gardens could provide vegetables, herbs, and fruit. Autumn brought harvest. Winter depended heavily on what had been stored. A household's knowledge of preservation mattered. Food had to survive when the fields were sleeping. Grain could be kept dry. Some foods could be salted. Others could be dried. Certain vegetables could remain in cool storage. Fruit could be preserved in different ways. The exact methods differed by place, but the basic idea was simple. Save what can be saved. Protect what can be protected. Use what cannot last. Nothing about this was casual. A person could not simply assume there would always be more. The harvest had to carry the household into the future. And so a full storehouse brought a special kind of peace. Not complete peace. There could still be illness, bad weather, animals becoming sick, a damaged roof, an accident. Many things could go wrong. But a full grain store meant that one problem had not yet become another. There was food. There was something waiting. And that was enough for the moment. Perhaps a woman enters the storage room in the morning. She opens a wooden container. She checks the grain. Her hand moves through it. She looks for dampness. She notices how much remains. Then she closes it again. The task takes only a moment. But it is part of the quiet mathematics of household life. How much is there? How much has been used? How much will be needed? How long until the next harvest? These questions could live quietly in the mind. The same was true of firewood. A pile beside the house might look large at the beginning of winter. Then it becomes smaller. Every evening, pieces are carried inside. Every morning, more are needed. The pile slowly disappears. Someone has to notice. Someone has to go into the woods. Wood must be gathered. Branches carried. Logs cut. The work can be tiring. But firewood becomes warmth. And warmth becomes cooking. And cooking becomes food. One simple task leads into another. The village is full of these connections. A farmer grows grain. A miller grinds it. A baker makes bread. A household eats it. The farmer keeps animals. The animals provide milk, wool, meat, or labor. The wool becomes thread. The thread becomes cloth. The cloth becomes clothing. The clothing becomes worn. Then it is repaired. Then repaired again. A piece of fabric could pass through many stages before it was finally discarded. Clothing was valuable. A medieval villager did not have a large collection of garments. The clothing needed to last. Wool was especially useful in many regions. It could provide warmth. It could be spun, woven, felted, dyed, repaired. A wool garment could become part of daily life for years. Linen was also important in many places. Cloth was made through patient work. The thread had to be prepared. The fibers had to be handled. The spinning had to be repeated. The weaving had to continue. A finished piece represented many quiet hours. Often the work could be done indoors. A person sitting near the fire. A spindle turning. The thread stretching between the fingers. A small repetitive motion. There is something almost meditative about it. Turn. Pull. Twist. Release. Again. The same movement. The same concentration. The room stays quiet. Outside, rain falls. Inside, thread becomes longer. The work of the village often had this quality. A person could perform one motion hundreds of times. There was no need to make each movement exciting. The repetition was the work. And because so much of life depended on repetitive tasks, patience became necessary. A field could not be harvested in a moment. A garment could not be woven instantly. Bread needed time. Milk needed to be collected. Animals needed to grow. A tree needed years. A person had to live at the pace of things. This was especially true of farming. The farmer could prepare the field, plant the seed, remove weeds, protect the crop. But then there was waiting. The seed was underground. Rain had to come. Sunlight had to arrive. The plant had to grow. No amount of impatience could make a field mature faster. So a farmer learned to watch. Tiny green shoots. Small leaves. Changing color. Flowers. Grain forming. The crop becoming heavy. The field changing week by week. The work continued around the waiting. And sometimes the waiting was the hardest part. Because the farmer could see the sky. A dry sky. A storm. A cold night. A sudden wind. A long period without rain. The land could be healthy one month and struggling the next. There was no certainty. But there was routine. And routine gave shape to uncertainty. Wake. Work. Watch. Wait. Return. Sleep. Then begin again. The same pattern could make even a difficult season feel understandable. People also knew how to make use of quiet moments. A farmer resting beside a field might repair a small tool. A shepherd might spin thread. Someone walking might gather useful plants. A person sitting beside the house might mend clothing. There was always something that could be done with the hands. The hands were rarely completely idle. Even rest could include work. And work could include rest. A person might sit while repairing a shoe. Someone might talk while sorting grain. Someone might sing softly while working. The sound of a voice could travel through a room. There were songs for work. Songs for religious occasions. Songs remembered from older generations. Not every task needed a song, of course. Often there was only silence. But the human voice was part of village life. So was laughter, though the village was not always a place of ease. There were worries. Debts. Bad harvests. Illness. Injury. Loss. Arguments. Hard weather. Difficult obligations. People could become exhausted. A farmer could spend an entire day in the field and return with little visible result. A mother could spend the entire day caring for children and still have more work waiting. A craft worker could work for hours and earn very little. A servant could have almost no control over the rhythm of the household where they worked. Medieval village life was not simply peaceful. It was physically demanding. It could be uncomfortable. It could be uncertain. And yet the daily experience was often made bearable by familiarity. People knew the work. They knew the tools. They knew the seasons. They knew the food. They knew the path home. They knew the faces around them. And they knew how to rest when the day finally ended. The afternoon could be especially quiet. The morning work had already been done. The sun was high. In summer, heat settled over the fields. The air became heavy. Birds seemed quieter. Animals searched for shade. A person might sit beneath a tree for a short while. The shade could feel precious. The ground beneath it was cooler. The wind moved through leaves. A water container rested nearby. A worker drank slowly. Perhaps they closed their eyes. There is no need to speak. The body simply rests. The field is still there. The work is still waiting. But for a few minutes, the world can remain as it is. The sun moves across the sky. The shadow of the tree shifts. Then the worker stands. The tool is lifted. And the work continues. In the hottest part of summer, shade could determine where people worked. Some tasks were done early. Others were postponed. People adjusted. Animals were also protected from heat. Water was carried. Work moved according to the conditions of the day. There was a practical wisdom in this. The body could not be ordered to ignore the weather. The weather was stronger. The sun could make the air difficult to breathe. The rain could stop a cart. The cold could make fingers stiff. The wind could damage roofs. The seasons were always present. Even inside the village. The house itself changed with them. In summer, doors could remain open. People might work outside. Clothing could be lighter. Food preparation could happen in open spaces. In winter, the house became more important. Doors closed. Firewood became precious. People gathered close. The same walls that felt warm in summer could feel cold in winter. The same roof that gave shade in July had to hold against rain and snow. The house was not simply a place to live. It was protection. And keeping it in good condition was part of the work. Walls needed repair. Thatched roofs needed attention. Wood needed replacement. Floors needed cleaning. Animals had to be kept where they would not damage the structure. A small crack could become a large problem. A leak could ruin bedding. Water could weaken walls. Smoke could darken everything. A house required care. There was no separate maintenance service. The household maintained itself. This meant that building skills were valuable. People knew how to work with local materials. Wood, stone, clay, straw, wattle, mud. Different regions had different building traditions. Some houses were made largely from timber. Others used stone. Some had earthen walls. Roofs could be thatched or covered with other materials. But wherever the village stood, the house usually reflected the materials available nearby. The building itself belonged to the landscape. A house built from local earth seemed to grow from the earth. A stone house carried the color of the surrounding stone. A wooden house smelled faintly of timber. And all of them aged. Walls became marked. Wood became smooth where hands touched it. Doors became worn around the handle. Steps became uneven. The same places were used again and again. A house carried the evidence of the people who lived there. Not through portraits. Not through written records. But through wear. A doorway worn by thousands of hands. A floor polished by thousands of footsteps. A bench shaped slightly by years of sitting. A wooden spoon darkened by use. These were quiet traces of lives. And many of those lives disappeared from written history. A person might live 60 years. They might raise children. Work a field. Repair a house. Attend weddings. Attend funerals. Watch seasons pass. And leave behind almost no written record. But their life was not empty. It was full of detail. A particular morning. A particular harvest. A particular winter. A child's first steps. A wedding meal. A journey to market. A new roof. A broken wheel. A sick animal. A warm summer evening. A cold morning. The birth of a child. The death of an old parent. These moments formed a whole life. And although history often remembers large events, the people living through them were still waking up each morning to ordinary tasks. A war might be happening somewhere far away. A king might be traveling. A castle might be changing hands. But in the village, someone still had to milk the cow. Someone still had to grind grain. Someone still had to carry water. Someone still had to repair the fence. History did not stop daily life. Daily life continued underneath it. A person might know very little about distant politics. Their concerns were closer. Will it rain? Is there enough grain? Is the animal healthy? Can the roof last another winter? Will the harvest be good? Can the child recover? Is there enough wood? When is the market? Will the road be passable? These questions filled ordinary minds. And perhaps the quietest part of medieval life was simply the scale of attention. The world was often experienced through what could be seen and touched nearby. The field, the house, the road, the village, the nearby town, the church, the river, the woods. Beyond that, the world became less certain. Travelers brought distant information. Merchants carried goods. Clergy carried messages. Officials might arrive. But for most daily purposes, the immediate landscape was enough. The village itself could feel like a complete little world. There were people to know, work to do, food to prepare, animals to care for, places to visit, rules to follow, seasons to watch, and at night, a place to sleep. The village also had its own social rhythm. Some people were more prosperous. Some had larger houses. Some had more animals. Some owned more land. Others had very little. There were workers who depended on others. Servants who lived in another household. Craft workers who sold their skills. Farmers who worked strips of land. People with obligations to landlords or local authorities. Life was not equal. The size of a person's house could tell you something about their position. The amount of land could tell you something. The animals. The clothing. The tools. But even among people with different resources, the physical world connected them. Everyone needed water. Everyone needed food. Everyone needed warmth. Everyone lived beneath weather. Everyone became tired. Everyone aged. The body did not care about social rank when it became exhausted after a long day. And so, when evening came, the village could become strangely equal in one simple way. People wanted to rest. The sun begins to fall. The long shadows return. The work slows. A farmer puts away the tool. A shepherd brings animals closer. A craft worker cleans the work area. A baker prepares for tomorrow. Someone gathers the last vegetables. Someone carries water inside. Someone checks the animals. Someone closes a gate. The road becomes quieter. The sky turns pale gold, then gray. The first smoke rises against the evening. And inside a house, a pot begins to simmer. The smell of food moves through the room. A child sits near the fire. An older person rests. A tired worker enters. The door closes. The warmth is immediate. The body knows the difference. Outside, the air is cooling. Inside, the fire holds the room. There may be bread on the table. A simple stew. Perhaps beans. Perhaps vegetables. Perhaps a little meat. Perhaps only porridge and bread. But the meal is warm. The bowl is held in both hands. Steam touches the face. The first bite is slow. After hours of work, food can make the whole body feel calmer. There is no need to rush. The day is almost over. Someone speaks softly. Someone else listens. The child begins to become sleepy. A spoon touches the bowl. The fire shifts. Outside, the last light disappears. And the village begins its nightly transformation. The same paths that were busy in the morning become empty. The well stands beneath the darkening sky. The fields become shadows. The animals settle into their shelters. The workshops close. The tools disappear into corners. The carts stop moving. Doors are closed. Windows become dark. One by one, the small homes become warm islands in the darkness. Inside one house, someone is still mending a shirt. The needle moves through cloth. In another, someone is spinning wool. In another, a family is finishing a meal. In another, a sick person lies beneath a blanket. In another, a baby has finally fallen asleep. And in another, someone is simply sitting near the fire. The day has taken almost everything from the body. There is no great desire to do anything more. The fire makes a soft sound. The room smells of smoke and food. The hands are warm. The eyes grow heavy. The person looks toward the doorway. Outside is darkness. The village is quiet. The work will return tomorrow. But tomorrow is not here yet. So the person remains near the fire. For a few minutes. Perhaps longer. The mind becomes slower. The sounds become softer. The fire becomes a small, steady light. And the body begins to understand that it is time to sleep. The last piece of wood settles. The flames become lower. Someone adds one small branch. The room brightens briefly. Then dims again. A blanket is unfolded. A sleeping place is prepared. Someone checks the door. Someone makes sure the fire is safe. Then the house becomes still. Outside, the night is clear. The moon is higher now. Its light touches the roofs. It falls across the fields. It catches the surface of the river. The water moves through the darkness. A faint breeze passes over the grass. The trees make a soft sound. The village sleeps. And somewhere beneath one of those old roofs, a person lies awake for just a little while longer. They can hear someone breathing nearby. They can hear the wind. They can feel the warmth left by the fire. They can smell the smoke still caught in the room. Their body is tired. Their hands are heavy. Their eyes are closing. Tomorrow will bring the same road. The same field. The same well. The same animals. The same work. But tonight there is no need to think about all of it. The day is finished. The tools are quiet. The bread has been eaten. The water has been carried. The animals are resting. The door is closed. And the old house is holding its family inside. Outside, the fields lie beneath the stars. The village road is empty. The church stands dark. The trees barely move. And the river continues its slow passage beyond the fields. The sound is gentle. Almost too quiet to notice. Water moving. Night passing. Time moving. And beneath the roofs, tired people sink deeper into sleep. Their dreams, whatever they may be, are hidden from us. We do not know what they imagined. Perhaps they dreamed of the fields. Perhaps of family. Perhaps of food. Perhaps of a journey. Perhaps nothing at all. Only darkness. Only rest. Only the simple relief of not having to work for a few hours. The village remains there around them. And as the night grows deeper, even the small sounds begin to disappear. The dog stops moving. The animals become quiet. The fire turns to embers. The wind becomes softer. The moon moves across the sky. And once again, the medieval village becomes almost completely still. But underneath that stillness, life is waiting. Grain waits in the storehouse. Tools wait beside the wall. Animals wait for morning. Fields wait for hands. Bread will be made again. Water will be carried again. Doors will open again. Footsteps will cross the road again. The same small world will wake again. And perhaps that is what makes the forgotten village feel so close, even after all these centuries. Not because every detail was gentle. Not because every day was easy. But because the rhythm was deeply human. Wake. Work. Eat. Rest. Care for others. Repair what is broken. Prepare for tomorrow. Sleep. Then wake again. A whole life could be built from these simple movements. Years could pass. Children could become adults. Adults could become old. The houses could be repaired. The fields could change. Trees could grow. Roads could move. People could leave. New people could arrive. And still, the basic rhythm remained. The fire was lit. The bread was prepared. The water was drawn. The earth was worked. The animals were fed. The night came. And the village slept. Now the sky is beginning to pale again. Not enough to wake everyone. Only enough to soften the darkness beyond the roofs. The river catches the first faint light. The fields become visible. The old paths return. A bird calls from the trees. Inside the houses, someone turns beneath a blanket. A child shifts. Someone reaches toward the cold ashes. The village is beginning again. And slowly, very slowly, the first flame of another morning returns. The first flame is small. It trembles in the dark corner of the room, touching the ash with a little warmth. The person beside it waits patiently, adding a thin piece of dry wood and watching until the flame catches. Outside, the village is still mostly asleep. The sky has become a little lighter, but the sun has not yet appeared. The roofs are dark shapes against the pale horizon. A thin mist rests close to the ground. The fields beyond the houses seem endless in the early morning. Then another door opens. A person steps outside carrying a bucket. Another fire begins. Another animal is fed. Another sleeping family slowly wakes. The village does not rise together. It wakes gradually. The sound of one household reaches another. A wooden latch moves. A bucket touches the ground. A chicken flutters from a perch. Someone coughs softly. A child begins to cry and is comforted. The first footsteps cross the packed earth. Morning has returned. And for the people living here, the morning carries its familiar list of needs. Water. Fire. Food. Animals. Work. The first person at the well may already know how cold the water will feel against the hands. The rope has become familiar. The wooden bucket has become familiar. Even the sound of water below is familiar. The bucket descends. The rope slides. The hand tightens. Then comes the weight. Up. Slowly. The water rises from the darkness. A little spills over. The person carries it home. And another person arrives at the well. The village has begun its quiet exchange of movement. At one house, bread is being prepared. At another, grain is being measured. At another, a child is being washed. At another, a farmer is already outside. The morning meal may be simple. Perhaps bread and a little cheese. Perhaps porridge. Perhaps yesterday's food warmed beside the fire. Perhaps milk. There are no endless choices. Food is whatever the household has. And this makes each ingredient familiar. People know the smell of their own grain. They know the taste of their own bread. They know which herbs grow near the house. They know which vegetables are ready. They know which animals are producing milk. The meal begins. Hands break bread. A bowl is passed. The fire makes a low sound. Someone drinks. Someone eats slowly. And soon enough, the household begins separating into the day's tasks. The morning has a natural order. Those who work with animals go outside. Those who work in the fields leave for the fields. Those who work at home begin preparing food, clothing, tools, and children. Craft workers open their workshops. Servants begin the work of another household. The village spreads outward. The small paths become busy. A person carries a basket. Another carries a rake. Another leads an ox. Another walks toward the market road. Someone is already returning from the well. The day grows brighter. And the first warmth of the sun touches the tops of the roofs. For the farmer, the field is waiting. For the craft worker, the workshop is waiting. For the household, the fire is waiting. For everyone, there is something that needs to be done. This is one of the quiet truths of village life. There is always something. A broken handle. A torn sleeve. A hungry animal. A dirty bowl. A wet floor. A leaking roof. A fence post that has shifted. A garden that needs attention. A field that needs walking. A child who needs watching. A fire that needs feeding. The list never completely disappears. The work simply changes shape. And perhaps this is why the rhythm of village life could feel so steady. No single task had to be finished before life could continue. One thing was done. Another appeared. Then another. The hands moved from task to task. The mind moved with them. And the seasons quietly decided which tasks mattered most. In spring, the fields received much attention. The ground had to be prepared. Seed had to be placed carefully. Young animals needed care. Fences needed repair after winter. Roofs needed inspection. The village itself seemed to wake after the cold months. Grass returned. Flowers appeared. Trees developed leaves. Birds became louder. The mornings became brighter. The days grew longer. People spent more time outside. The smell of damp earth filled the air. After rain, the roads became dark and soft. Footprints remained in the mud. Cartwheels left deep lines. Children could splash through puddles. Adults stepped carefully. A heavy cart could become stuck. Then several people might gather around it. Hands against wood. Shoulders pushing. An animal pulling. The wheel moves slightly. Mud gives way. Again. Again. Finally, the cart begins to move. The people step back. Someone wipes mud from a sleeve. The journey continues. Nothing about the moment would be remembered in a grand history. But these small difficulties were part of daily existence. The road was not always kind. The weather did not always cooperate. The tools did not always work. The animals did not always behave. And people had to solve these little problems as they appeared. Sometimes quietly. Sometimes with help from neighbors. The village was a place where practical knowledge mattered. A person knew how to tie a rope. How to mend a basket. How to judge the weight of grain. How to keep a fire burning. How to calm an animal. How to carry a heavy load without losing balance. How to recognize a damaged wheel. How to patch a roof. How to sharpen a blade. How to keep food dry. How to prepare for winter. These skills could be more useful than anything written in a book. and they were often learned by watching. An older person works. A younger person stands nearby. The older person shows how the hand should move. The younger person tries. The tool slips. The older person corrects it. Try again. Slowly, the movement becomes natural. This is how a village remembers itself. Not only through stories. Through hands. A technique passes from one person to another. A recipe. A way of building. A way of weaving. A way of planting. A way of repairing. The details might change slightly with each generation, but the basic knowledge continues. The village becomes a living memory. And every household carries a small part of it. The women preparing food know how much grain is needed. The farmers know the soil. The shepherds know the animals. The blacksmith knows the fire. The carpenter knows the wood. The miller knows the grain. The baker knows the oven. The fisherman knows the water. Each person has their own quiet knowledge. And sometimes a person knows several kinds of work. A farmer may also be a carpenter. A craft worker may keep a garden. A household worker may spin wool. A shepherd may repair tools. People are not always defined by one occupation. Life requires flexibility. There are days when one job takes priority. A roof breaks. A cow becomes ill. Rain threatens the harvest. A cart loses a wheel. A child needs care. A neighbor needs help. The normal routine bends around a problem. Then it returns. This is especially visible during harvest. The fields become the center of village life. Everyone who can help may be involved. The grain stands tall. The weather is watched carefully. A stretch of rain can delay the work. Dry weather is valuable. People move through the fields. Cutting. Gathering. Binding. Carrying. Stacking. The work creates a slow wave of movement across the land. A person bends. Cuts. Straightens. Moves forward. Bends again. The sun rises higher. The body becomes warm. The hands become dusty. The field seems to stretch forever. But little by little, the crop becomes smaller. The harvest gathers into bundles. The bundles become stacks. The stacks become loads. The loads travel toward the village. A cart creaks along the road. An animal walks slowly. Dust rises around its legs. People walk beside it. The village seems busier than usual. There is grain everywhere. In baskets. On carts. In storage. On the threshing floor. The work continues until the light begins to fade. Then people return home. Their clothing is dusty. Their hands are sore. Their backs ache. But there is food stored. And that thought carries its own quiet comfort. Later, after the evening meal, someone may still be talking about the harvest. Was it good? Was it enough? Did the rain arrive at the right time? How much should be kept? How much could be traded? These questions are practical, but they can also carry emotion. A good harvest means breathing a little easier. A poor harvest means thinking carefully about the months ahead. The village knows the difference. The barns know the difference. The storage rooms know the difference. Winter will reveal it. And winter is always somewhere in the future. Even during warm summer evenings, people know it will come. So the village prepares. Wood is gathered. Clothing is repaired. Walls are strengthened. Food is preserved. Animals are housed. The summer work contains the winter within it. A person carrying a bundle of wood through the warm afternoon is also preparing for a cold night months away. A person filling a grain store is preparing for days when the fields will be empty. A person repairing a roof beneath a bright sky is preparing for rain. This connection between present work and future survival is part of the village rhythm. The work done today may not be enjoyed today. Sometimes it is simply preparation. And preparation takes patience. The same patience is needed for making clothing. A piece of wool begins with an animal. The animal must be cared for. The wool must be collected. It must be cleaned. Prepared. Spun. The spindle turns. Thread grows. The thread is gathered. Then comes weaving. The loom becomes part of the room. Wood. Thread. Hands. The pattern slowly forms. The work can be repetitive. A shuttle moves. Threads separate. The shuttle returns. Again. Again. The cloth grows. A person could spend hours doing this. The sound is soft. Wood moving against wood. Thread pulled tight. A foot pressing. A hand adjusting. The room remains quiet. Perhaps someone else is sitting nearby. Perhaps children are playing. Perhaps the fire is burning. Outside, the village is busy. Inside, cloth is being made. The finished fabric will become something useful. A shirt. A dress. A covering. A blanket. A piece of clothing for a child. And because cloth is precious, it is treated carefully. A tear is not the end of the garment. It is a reason to mend it. A sleeve becomes thin. The fabric is patched. A seam comes loose. It is sewn. A child grows. The garment may be altered. Nothing needs to be perfect. It only needs to last. This principle appears everywhere. A pot is repaired. A basket is woven again. A shoe is patched. A tool handle is replaced. A wooden bowl is smoothed. A roof is covered. A wall is filled. A door is strengthened. The village is constantly repairing itself. The people are repairing themselves as well. After a hard day's work, rest becomes part of the repair. A person sits. Someone stretches their legs. A tired back leans against the wall. A hand is held near the fire. The body slowly cools from the day's effort. The evening meal helps. Warm food. Water. A little quiet. Perhaps a conversation. Perhaps no conversation at all. There is comfort in simply sitting near people who are familiar. Family life could be crowded. Several generations might live close together. Grandparents. Parents. Children. Sometimes relatives. Sometimes servants. The house had to hold them all. Space was limited. Privacy was limited. But shared life was normal. Children grew up surrounded by adults. They heard conversations. They watched work. They saw illness. They saw birds. They saw animals being born. They saw food being prepared. They saw clothing made. They saw people age. The entire cycle of life was close. A child might understand the world through watching an older person knead bread. Or through following a farmer into a field. Or through carrying a small basket beside a parent. The lessons were not separate from life. They were life. And children could be expected to help. The smallest tasks could still matter. Collecting eggs. Carrying small pieces of wood. watching a younger sibling, bringing a message, picking vegetables, scattering grain for chickens. The work was not always heavy, but it taught attention. A child learned that if the animals were not fed, they became restless. If the fire was neglected, the room became cold. If the water was not carried, cooking became difficult. If clothing was not repaired, it became unusable. The village taught consequences through ordinary things. And there were also moments when children were simply children. They could run, play near houses, chase one another, watch animals, make small games from sticks, stones, cloth, or whatever was available. The village was their entire playground. A ditch could become interesting. A tree could become a hiding place. A stream could become a place for watching insects. A patch of grass could become a place to sit. The world did not need to be full of objects to be interesting. A child could spend a long time watching water move around stones, or following an ant, or listening to birds. The hours could be slow, and adults could also become absorbed in small things. A fisherman sitting beside a river, a shepherd watching sheep, a farmer resting at the edge of a field, a woman spinning thread, a carpenter smoothing wood, a blacksmith waiting for metal to heat. These moments contain long stretches of quiet attention. The river itself becomes a world. A fisherman walks down toward the water in the early morning. The air is cool. The river surface is gray. Mist rests near the bank. He carries a net or other fishing equipment. The water moves quietly. He waits. Perhaps there is very little to see. A bird flies low. A fish disturbs the surface. The fisherman adjusts his position, then waits again. Fishing can be patient work. The river gives nothing on command. A person has to watch. The same river can be beautiful in the morning and dangerous during heavy rain. It can rise. It can fall. It can flood fields. It can carry boats. It can provide fish. It can provide water. It can shape the land. Villages near rivers are built around this presence. The river is never just a line of water. It is part of the village's life. Children may know its shallow places. Farmers may know where the soil is richest. Fishermen know where the water moves differently. Travelers know where the crossing lies. Women carrying water know where the bank is easiest to reach. The river is remembered through use. And at night, its sound can carry far. Someone lying in a house near the water might hear it. Water over stones. Water against mud. Water moving past reeds. The sound becomes part of sleep. The same is true of rain. A medieval house could make rain especially noticeable. Drops strike the roof. They find weak places. They run along the walls. A person may wake to the sound. If the roof holds, the sound can be comforting. If it leaks, someone has to move. A pot is placed beneath the drip. A cloth is spread. The problem will be repaired later. For now, the rain continues. It falls across the fields. It darkens the road. It fills the stream. It touches the roofs. Inside, people listen. Rain changes the village. The road becomes soft. The fields become wet. The river grows louder. People may remain indoors longer. The fire becomes important. Work shifts toward tasks that can be done inside. Spinning. Weaving. Mending. Food preparation. Tool repair. People sit closer together. The house becomes a small world. The outside is reduced to sound. Rain. Wind. Animal noises. Perhaps thunder far away. Inside there is firelight. Warm food. Wet clothing drying. The smell of smoke. The soft movement of hands working. This could be a long day. A person might sit for hours. The rain does not stop. The same thread is spun. The same garment is repaired. The same fire is watched. Time passes slowly. And when the rain finally ends, the village changes again. The air smells fresh. Water drips from roofs. Puddles reflect the sky. The road is muddy. Leaves shine. The fields are dark. People step outside. They inspect the damage. They check the animals. They look at the crops. They begin clearing water from places where it has gathered. Life adjusts. There is no perfect day. There are only days that require different work. The same is true of winter. Winter narrows the village. The days become short. Morning arrives late. Evening comes early. The fields are often quiet. The air can be sharp. The ground may freeze. Snow can cover the roads. In colder regions, the village seems almost buried in white. Smoke rises from every roof. People stay close to fires. Animals are kept sheltered. Outdoor work becomes harder. The body loses warmth quickly. Hands become stiff. Feet become cold. A person returning from outside may stand near the fire before doing anything else. The warmth reaches the fingers slowly. First the skin tingles. Then the hands begin to loosen. A cup of warm food feels especially valuable. A thick piece of clothing becomes a comfort. A blanket becomes precious. Winter teaches people to appreciate warmth. And it also teaches them to save it. Doors are closed. Windows are covered. People sit close. A small room becomes easier to warm than a large one. The fire must be watched. Too little wood means cold. Too much can waste fuel. The household learns how to manage the flame. The fire becomes almost another member of the family. It must be fed, protected, kept alive. At night, the last person awake may be responsible for making sure it is safe. The flames are lowered. The embers are covered. Then the person goes to bed. The room is dark. The warmth remains. Outside, snow falls quietly. A roof receives it. A tree bends slightly. The road disappears. The village becomes almost silent. Snow absorbs sound. Footsteps become soft. Carts stop moving. Animals are quiet. The entire landscape seems slower. And inside, the fire continues to glow. This could be one of the most peaceful scenes in a medieval village. A family gathered around a small fire while snow falls outside. Someone spins wool. Someone repairs a shoe. Someone cuts bread. A child sleeps. An older person sits near the warmth. The firelight moves over their faces. The walls are dark. The room smells of smoke and wool. Nothing needs to happen. The evening can simply pass. There may be conversation. There may be prayer. There may be stories. People could tell stories about family. About the village. About old events. About places they had visited. About things they had heard from travelers. Some stories would be remembered for years. Others would disappear with the people who told them. This is one reason so much village life is forgotten. Much of it was spoken, not written. A grandmother could know dozens of small stories. A farmer could remember how the river flooded when he was young. A craft worker could know the history of a tool. A shepherd could know where an animal had been born. A child could remember a winter that seemed impossibly cold. These memories belonged to people. When those people died, some memories disappeared with them. And yet the village continued. New children were born. New hands learned old tasks. New feet walked old paths. New fires were lit inside old houses. The generations changed. The rhythm remained. A young person might marry and move into another household. A new family might form. A baby might sleep beside the fire. The house becomes crowded again. The child grows. Learns to walk. Learns to speak. Learns to carry small things. Years pass. The child becomes a worker. Then perhaps a parent. The cycle continues. Village life was full of these quiet transitions. They did not always have a clear boundary. Childhood slowly became responsibility. Youth slowly became adulthood. Adulthood slowly became old age. The older person might work less physically, but they still had knowledge. They might supervise, teach, remember, tell someone when a certain task had been done differently in earlier years. They might sit near the fire. Their hands may no longer be as strong, but their memory was part of the household. And when the evening became quiet, they could watch younger people moving around the room. A child carrying a bowl. A parent feeding a baby. Someone repairing cloth. The same room holding several generations. The old person had once been the child. Now the child was growing. Time moved through the house. Outside, the village also changed. A fence was replaced. A tree became larger. A roof was repaired. A path shifted. A new building appeared. An old building disappeared. A field boundary moved. The river changed its edge. The village was never exactly the same. But to someone living there, it was familiar. They could see changes that another person might miss. The tree was taller. The wall was newer. The road was different after last year's rain. The old barn leaned farther. The mill wheel had been repaired. The church roof had changed. The village was alive in small ways. And every evening, the same basic process repeated. The sun lowers. The workers return. The animals are brought in. Water is carried. Food is cooked. Tools are stored. Doors close. Firelight appears. People sit. Then sleep. Perhaps that rhythm is the closest thing to a clock that the village really needs. The light of the sky tells people when to wake. The sun tells them when to work. Hunger tells them when to eat. Darkness tells them when to stop. Tiredness tells them when to sleep. And the seasons tell them what kind of work belongs to the year. The body itself becomes part of the calendar. A person's hands know when harvest is coming. Their back knows how long the day has been. Their feet know the road. Their eyes know the weather. Their stomach knows the hour of food. Their tiredness knows the evening. There is something deeply simple in that rhythm. And tonight, as we remain beside the old village, we can imagine one ordinary evening more closely. The fields are dark now. The last worker has returned. A wooden gate closes. The animal inside shifts once and becomes quiet. A woman carries a bucket into the house. The water catches a little firelight. Someone places bread on the table. The loaf is warm. A knife moves through the crust. The room smells of grain and smoke. A child reaches toward the bread. A hand gently moves the child's fingers back. Wait. The meal is ready. Everyone settles. The bowl is filled. The fire burns. Outside, the wind has become colder. The door keeps it mostly away. Inside, shoulders begin to relax. The day's work is leaving the body. A person leans back. Another stretches tired legs. Someone rubs a sore hand. Someone yawns. No one needs to announce that the day is ending. Everyone knows. The meal is finished. The bowl is scraped clean. The last piece of bread is broken. A little water is poured. The table becomes quiet. Someone stands to clear it. The work continues for just a little longer. Then the bowls are washed. The pot is placed aside. The floor is swept. The fire is adjusted. The animals are checked. The door is closed. Now the household can rest. The firelight becomes softer. A person repairs one last small tear. The thread passes through cloth. Pull. Again. The work is almost finished. The eyes become heavy. The needle is put away. The cloth is folded. The room grows still. A child is already asleep. Someone carries the child toward the sleeping place. The blanket is pulled over small shoulders. The fire makes a quiet crack. Then another. The adults speak softly. Their voices become slower. Eventually, even those voices disappear. The house is silent. Outside, the village is silent too. The night air settles over the fields. The river continues. The trees stand dark. The road is empty. And beneath the roof, people sleep. Perhaps the same people will wake tomorrow. Perhaps a child will wake before everyone else. Perhaps someone will cough. Perhaps the fire will be difficult to relight. Perhaps rain will arrive. Perhaps the morning will be clear. There is no need to know. Tonight is enough. The old house holds. The blanket is warm enough. The fire leaves a little heat. The body is tired. The breathing becomes slow. And the village continues resting. Beyond the fields, the river moves under the moon. The water passes. The night passes. The years pass. But the village remains inside its rhythm. Fire. Water. Bread. Earth. Work. Rest. Sleep. And somewhere beneath the old roof, one person turns gently in the straw and settles again. The house becomes quiet. The last ember glows. The wind touches the roof. Then moves away. Nothing else is required. For now, the village can simply sleep. And when morning comes, the first person will reach toward the ashes again. A tiny ember will brighten. A flame will appear. And another ordinary day will begin, slowly and quietly, with the smell of smoke, the sound of water from the well, and the soft footsteps of people returning to the work that has always waited for them. Morning will come again, but for now the medieval village remains beneath the last hours of darkness. The houses are quiet. The fields are still. The road is empty. A little warmth remains beneath the ashes of the fire, and inside the sleeping homes, tired bodies lie beneath blankets and rough coverings, resting after another day of ordinary work. There is no great event waiting in the darkness. No battle. No royal procession. No sudden change. only the slow passing of night. And perhaps that is where we can leave the village. Not with a grand ending, but with the same quiet rhythm that has carried us here. A person wakes. A fire is lit. Water is carried. Bread is made. Animals are fed. Fields are worked. Clothing is repaired. Food is prepared. Children are cared for. The evening comes. The fire burns low. And people sleep. Then the same life begins again. For generations, these small movements formed the greater part of existence. Most people who lived in medieval villages were not remembered by name. Their houses disappeared. Their paths changed. Their fields were divided or joined. Their tools rusted. Their clothing turned to dust. Their voices faded. But while they lived, the ordinary things mattered. The warmth of a fire after a cold morning. The first bread of the day. A full bucket of clean water. The shade of a tree during heavy summer heat. The sound of rain against a roof. A child sleeping near the hearth. A tired body finally resting at night. A familiar road beneath familiar feet. These were the small comforts that filled the spaces between work. And perhaps, after all these centuries, those are the details that are easiest to imagine. The village is quiet now. The moon has moved farther across the sky. The river continues its slow journey beyond the fields. Its water passes beneath the darkness without hurry. A little breeze moves through the grass. The roofs remain still. The trees make a faint sound. Somewhere in the distance, an animal shifts in its shelter. Then becomes quiet again. Inside one small house, the final ember has almost disappeared. The room is dark. The people sleeping there do not need to know what hour it is. They only need to rest. The work of the day is finished. The bread has been eaten. The animals have been fed. The door has been closed. The tools are waiting. The fields are waiting. Tomorrow will take care of itself when it arrives. For now, there is only sleep. And slowly, the village seems to become part of the landscape again. The houses beneath the trees. The fields beneath the stars. The river beyond them. The narrow road running quietly through the darkness. Everything becomes still. The people who once walked these roads are gone now. But the places they knew have not entirely disappeared. A hill may still rise where they saw it. A river may still follow an old course. A field may still lie beneath the same sky. The wind still passes over grass. Rain still falls on roofs. Fire still brings warmth. Bread still rises. People still become tired after long days. And night still arrives. The world changes, but some rhythms remain familiar. The old village has become quiet enough now that we can almost hear the smallest things. A faint breath. The soft settling of straw. A branch moving outside. Water far away. Then nothing. The darkness becomes deeper. The tired mind becomes slower. The fields seem farther away. The houses become softer shapes. The river becomes only a sound. And the sound becomes softer still. Perhaps the last thought is not about work. Not about hunger. Not about weather. Not about the coming morning. Perhaps it is simply the warmth of the room. The feeling of being sheltered. The heavy comfort of tired limbs. The quiet presence of other sleeping people nearby. The steady darkness beyond the walls. There is nothing more that needs to be done tonight. The medieval village can rest. And you can rest with it. Let the old road disappear beneath the darkness. Let the fields become quiet. Let the houses fade into the night. Let the river carry its soft sound farther and farther away. The fire is almost gone now. Only a little warmth remains. The last ember glows beneath the ash. Then slowly, even that light fades. The room becomes completely dark. Outside, the moon moves onward. The stars remain above the roofs. The river continues through the sleeping land. And the village rests beneath the wide, quiet sky. Morning will come. The doors will open. The fires will be lit. The wells will be visited. The animals will stir. The fields will wait. But none of that matters now. For now, the night is gentle. The old houses are quiet. The road is empty. The river is moving softly. And the people beneath the roofs are sleeping. So let the village become distant. Let the sounds grow faint. Let the fields disappear. Let the river become a whisper. And let the last little glow of the medieval hearth fade into darkness. The night remains. The village rests. The river flows. And slowly, peacefully, everything becomes still. Good night.